2 days before his assassination, President Kennedy watched a Bond film in the White House. It was the last movie he ever saw. That detail has followed from Russia with Love Like a Shadow for over 6 decades. The 1963 film that turned a franchise into a global phenomenon hides more secrets than any spy thriller has a right to. Real espionage weapons, a chess match borrowed from history, a director who survived a helicopter crash and was back behind the camera within the hour, and a performance delivered by a dying man who never lived to see the finished film. Today, 15 facts about From Russia with Love, from the villain who stood on a box, to the title sequence that was accidentally invented, to the bonus fact that will stay with you long after the credits roll. Fact 1. The last film a president ever watched. In 1961, President Kennedy listed Ian Fleming's novel among his 10 favorite books in Life magazine. That endorsement sent it flying off shelves across America and directly influenced producers Broccoli and Saltzman to choose it as the follow-up to Dr. No. On November 20th, 1963, 2 days before his assassination, Kennedy watched a private screening of From Russia with Love at the White House. It was the last film he ever saw. A presidential endorsement helped create the film. The president never lived to know what he had started. Fact 2. A last-minute edit that changed the franchise forever. The film opens with Bond stalking through a moonlit garden, only to be ambushed and strangled. Then the lights come on. The man killed wasn't Bond at all. He was a training dummy wearing a prosthetic mask of 007's face. This scene wasn't part of the original plan. Editor Peter Hunt and director Terrence Young came up with it during post-production, moving a Red Grant training exercise to the very beginning, right before the main titles. That single decision established the pre-title action sequence that has become a signature of every Bond film since. The franchise's most enduring structural tradition was invented in an editing room, after filming had wrapped as an afterthought. Fact 3. The chess match that actually happened. Early in the film, Spectre strategist Kronstein wins a tense chess match before being summoned to plan Bond's assassination. The game wasn't invented by a screenwriter. It was taken directly from Boris Spassky's legendary victory over David Bronstein at the 1960 USSR Championship in Leningrad. A brilliant king's gambit that Spassky himself later called his most unforgettable game. The filmmakers altered the position slightly, removing 2 pawns, reportedly because they mistakenly believed chess games could be copyrighted. Spassky would go on to become world champion. His greatest game lives on in a Bond film that most viewers never realized was hiding real chess history inside it. Fact 4. The Bond girl whose voice belonged to someone else. Daniela Bianchi was 21 when she was cast as Tatiana Romanova, the youngest actress to play a leading Bond girl, a record she held for over 2 decades. Before stepping onto a film set, she had already been crowned first runner-up at Miss Universe. Here's what most fans never realize. Every single word Tatiana speaks was voiced by someone else. Bianchi spoke almost no English, delivering her lines phonetically with a heavy Italian accent. Director Terrence Young brought in British actress Barbara Jefford to re-record all of Bianchi's dialogue in post-production. Bianchi is on screen. Jefford is the voice you hear. The most celebrated Bond girl of the early franchise was, in a precise technical sense, 2 different people. Fact 5. The villain organization that exists because the producers were afraid of World War III. In Fleming's original novel, Bond's enemies are SMERSH, the real Soviet counterintelligence agency. With Cold War tensions running dangerously high and the Cuban Missile Crisis still fresh in the world's memory, producers Broccoli and Saltzman decided it was too risky to make the Soviet Union the outright villain. So they created Spectre, a fictional criminal organization with no political allegiance. That decision freed the franchise from any single geopolitical conflict. It also introduced Ernst Stavro Blofeld, making his very first appearance in this film, shown only as a shadowy figure stroking a white cat. One act of Cold War caution produced cinema's most iconic villain silhouette. Fact 6. The villain who stood on a box. Robert Shaw's portrayal of Spectre assassin Red Grant is one of the most menacing performances in Bond history. Cold, calculating, physically imposing. Here's the secret Shaw revealed on The Tonight Show. He was 4 inches shorter than Sean Connery. To maintain the illusion that Grant was a towering threat, Shaw had to stand on a wooden crate during their scenes together. The crate worked. The performance was so powerful it caught the attention of a young Steven Spielberg, who later cast Shaw as Shark Hunter Quint in Jaws. 1 Bond villain, 1 wooden box, 1 performance that launched an entirely separate cinematic legacy. Fact 7. The the character who appeared in 17 films and started with one briefcase. The Q we know was born right here. Actor Desmond Llewellyn made his first appearance in the role in From Russia with Love, replacing Peter Burton, who had played the character under the name Major Boothroyd in Dr. No. Llewellyn, would go on to portray Q in 17 Bond films over 36 years, one of the longest-serving actors in franchise history. His introduction scene, presenting Bond with a trick attaché case, set the template for every Q scene that followed. From exploding pens to invisible cars, it all traces back to one man, one briefcase, and this film. Fact 8. The train fight that took 3 weeks in a box. The fight between Bond and Red Grant aboard the Orient Express is widely considered one of the greatest hand-to-hand combat scenes in film history. Director Terence Young, who had been a boxer at Cambridge, personally choreographed the sequence alongside stunt coordinator Peter Perkins. It took 3 weeks inside the confined space of a train compartment. Connery and Shaw insisted on doing nearly all of it themselves, using stunt doubles for only a single shot. There is no music in the scene, just fists, grunts, and the rhythmic clatter of the train. 3 weeks in a box to produce 3 minutes of cinema that still holds up 60 years later. A franchise tradition invented in an editing room. A villain standing on a box. And the most famous Bond girl of the early franchise, whose voice belonged to someone else entirely. We're not halfway through. Still coming. The director who survived a helicopter crash and was back on set within the hour. The Oscar nominee in Killer Shoes, whose footwear was based on a real KGB weapon. And the bonus, a dying actor, a rearranged shooting schedule, and the most courageous performance in the franchise's history. Fact 9. An Oscar nominee in shoes based on a real KGB weapon. Director Terence Young chose Lotte Lenya for Rosa Klebb after hearing one of her musical recordings. Lenya was no ordinary actress, a Tony Award winner, famed for her work in Brecht and Weill's Threepenny Opera, recently nominated for an Academy Award for The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone. At 61, she brought a chilling, reptilian menace to Klebb that no younger actress could have matched. Then there are those shoes. Klebb's poison-tipped blade concealed in her footwear was based on an actual KGB weapon. Soviet operatives were known to carry concealed blades in their footwear. Fleming, who had worked in British naval intelligence during the Second World War, drew from real espionage tradecraft. Lenya reportedly said that people she met would instinctively glance down at her feet. They had reason to. Fact 10. The helicopter that almost killed Sean Connery. Bond is pursued by a helicopter in a sequence echoing Hitchcock's crop duster attack in North by Northwest. Unlike a Hollywood simulation, the danger was real. Connery performed the stunt himself as the helicopter swooped overhead. The pilot was inexperienced with stunt flying and repeatedly flew far too close, genuinely endangering the actor's life. In the finished film, you can see exactly how narrow the margins were. The scene's tension feels authentic because the danger was authentic. Fact 11. The director who crashed into the sea and was back on set within the hour. Director Terence Young survived his own near-fatal accident during the same production. While scouting locations in Scotland, the helicopter carrying Young, art director Michael White, and a cameraman plunged into the water after being caught by a violent wind. The craft sank to 40 feet. White was thrown clear. The pilot swam free. Young was trapped underwater inside a small air pocket until the crew smashed open the canopy and pulled him out, bleeding and battered. Terence Young was back behind the camera within the hour. Fact 12. The title sequence invented by accident. When original title designer Maurice Binder had disagreements with the producers and walked away, graphic artist Robert Brownjohn stepped in. Brownjohn projected the opening credits directly onto the bodies of belly dancers, creating a hypnotic visual experience unlike anything audiences had seen. The technique established the tradition of silhouetted women in Bond opening credits, a visual signature enduring across every era of the franchise. The most recognizable visual motif in Bond history happened because the original designer walked away. Fact 13. What does Hitchcock have to do with a Bond film he never directed? After Dr. No, Alfred Hitchcock reportedly expressed interest in directing a Bond film. The deal never materialized, likely because Hitchcock's fee alone would have consumed a significant chunk of the budget. Terence Young returned instead, but Hitchcock's shadow is visible throughout. The helicopter chase directly nods to the crop duster sequence in Hitchcock's North by Northwest. The film's overall tone of paranoid suspense feels deeply Hitchcockian. From Russia with Love is the closest the franchise ever got to his sensibility. Fact 14. Fleming wrote it as Bond's final adventure. From Russia with Love was Fleming's personal favorite novel, and he originally intended it to be the last one. Frustrated by disappointing sales, he wrote the ending as a potential farewell. In the book, Klebb successfully poisons Bond and 007 collapses in what appears to be his death. Fleming left the ending ambiguous, giving himself the option to close the series permanently. It was only after the novel became a bestseller, boosted by Kennedy's endorsement, that Fleming decided to bring Bond back. One man's frustration nearly killed the most famous spy in literary history. A president's reading list kept him alive. Fact 15. A $2 million gamble, a $12 million return. The moment Bond became unstoppable. Dr. No had been made on roughly $1 million. United Artists doubled the budget for the sequel and gave Connery an additional $100,000 on top of his $54,000 salary. That investment allowed for location shooting in Istanbul, elaborate set pieces, and a production scale that launched the franchise toward becoming one of the most profitable film series in history. From Russia with Love earned over $12 million worldwide, more than double what Dr. No had brought in. The Bond franchise was no longer a gamble, it was a goldmine, and now the bonus I've been saving for last. This one stays with you. Mexican actor Pedro Armendáriz was cast as Karim Bey on the recommendation of John Ford. Just before filming began, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Rather than recast, Terrence Young rearranged the entire production schedule to film all of his scenes first, condensing them into 2 weeks. Though visibly in pain, Armendáriz pushed through every scene. During production, he and Ian Fleming, himself seriously ill, bonded over their mutual friend Ernest Hemingway, who had taken his own life rather than face terminal illness the previous year. When his scenes wrapped, Young threw a farewell party. 1 month later, Armendáriz took his own life in his hospital room. He never saw the finished film. For the remaining scenes, Young himself served as stand-in, filmed from behind so the audience would never know. It is one of the most courageous performances in cinema history, delivered by a man who knew exactly what he was racing against, in a film he would never live to watch.